going to be live streaming this as well.
I beg your pardon?
This is another live stream meeting.
Live stream, yep. So if you like to live stream.
And Your Worship, we'll let in the guests in the lobby now, if you're happy with that.
The guests in the lobby?
Yeah, who do we have, Aisha? I see the sign.
The Rel's in there. I'm Rowena.
Kia ora.
You are Rowena.
Kia ora.
Okay. Is Laurel with you as well, Rowena?
Peter is waiting
yes,
as well.
Good. Okay.
Laurel's here, and so is Shirley, and Noma and Peter will be joining us from wherever he is in the world.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Well, I'll declare the meeting open, and can we have the prayer on the screen, please? John Jesus, would you like to read this prayer for us, please? Minutes left. Thank you. Can we just have, there we go. Thank you. John, carry on. Thank you.
We ask that through council discussions and decisions, the representatives we have elected may govern the Far North District with imagination, skills and wisdom to achieve a fairer and more united community that enhances the well-being of our district, solve the district's problems efficiently and effectively. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, John. Right, apologies. We haven't had any, Aisha, I understand, any information from Mike Edmonds, so he hasn't put an apology in. Is that correct?
I haven't received anything, Your Worship. Okay,
all right. We'll just assume that he's not present. So welcome our guests to the official council meeting. Just so you're aware, you're being live streamed. So there'll be others who will be watching. They can't participate or anything of that nature, but just so you know, you're being live streamed. So, Laurel, I understand you're leading this. Is that correct, or is it you, Rowena?
Kia ora, John. I'd like Laurel to start us off, if she may, please.
Okay, and you have up to 10 minutes to make your presentation. I'll start the stopwatch in a second when I can get it going. And just make the point that if you finish early, the councillors may have some questions they might wish to ask of you. But the floor is yours. So,
John, can I just ask before you start that timer? We've got a document to share, and we can't share it yet because don't know how to share it on this Teams thing.
And just make the point that if
there it is.
Laurel has sent it through to me, so I'm sharing it with you all now. Hopefully you can see it.
So there you go, Rowena. She's all on the screen.
Bye-bye.
Oh, kia ora, Aisha. Sorry, there's a PowerPoint presentation. That's this is just sort of a paper, but it's 7 pages, so you might want to reserve that for later, and I'll just talk to the presentation.
Yes, please. Right, I'm going to start you off now.
Sorry, I haven't seen it come through yet, Laurel.
Okay, how do we share this?
So on your screen somewhere there is a little computer screen, and it'll ask you which window you want to share.
No, can't see anything, sorry. But never mind, we'll just use our 10 minutes wisely.
Got it?
Well done.
Okay, thanks.
Right.
Thank you.
I've started the stop button.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having us. As the Hunter Park Charitable Trust, we just wanted to discuss with Council, I guess, where we're at with our project. We are looking to open very soon with the date confirmed with the Prime Minister for the 9th of October. So that's really exciting. And I guess for us, we've just got a couple of key critical issues to work through, which is operating management, and in particular some of the cleaning contracts and the Trust's position in terms of being the kaitiaki and overall, I guess, guardian of the original Hundavasa toilets, but also the new centre. And I just have, this isn't right, where's that presentation on there? I can't see anything. They can't see that one. Where's the weird one they can see?
Oh, she must have taken it down. Yeah.
Oh yeah, but it's Aisha. Sorry. Just with regards to the centre itself, so I'll just give an update to councillors to confirm that they know what aspects are part of the centre. So we've got a library, the original Hundavasa toilets, the interpretive centre and gallery. We've got a hub office that's doing information and tours. We've got a community workshop space and new public toilets, and also Freedom Camper showers. So the Trust had put through a proposal to manage as kaitiaki the whole space. And we're just getting a little resistance or unsure how to progress that through council in terms of operating the centre with respect to the Trust being the kaitiaki of the centre. And I mean, in terms of the project itself, the Trust have contributed almost over 80% of the funding for the project through various mechanisms, and council itself has contributed 8%, and that'll be in that paper that I've sent around as well, with Whānau Holdings investing 10%. So I guess from the Trust perspective, we don't own any part of the centre, but we do want to be recognised formally as the kaitiaki, and so we can. It's very difficult to open a new centre without any, I guess, assurance that what we're promoting and encouraging visitors to come to has, I guess, a level of control and standard that we can put forward to the world here. So I don't know if one of our trustees might like to have a chat.
I don't mind having a go, Laurel. Mayor John Carter, councils and management, thank you for having us. We are the Kawakawa Hundavasa Trust, of which Ngāti Hine make up half the trustees on the Hundavasa Trust. Together, we've been working with council and Whānau Holdings and other key stakeholders to build, plan and build the Te Hononga Centre, including the Hundavasa Memorial Park, which is administered by the Whānau District Council. So we will have the Prime Minister opening the centre, and I hope you can all be there as well in October. What we're requesting from Council is that, given that we have a strong relationship with the Hundavasa Foundation in Vienna, and we are noted in the Kawakawa community as the official kaitiaki of the toilets, and thereby working with Council and Whānau District Whānau Holdings for the new centre, we want to develop a much more stronger and formal relationship with Council so that we can conduct our role as kaitiaki, which may have some implications for the core role of Council in looking after what is a public amenity. So please be clear, we are seeking a strong relationship through a formal agreement, which Laurel will correct me if I'm wrong, which can be built on the reserve itself. And please know that we and people in our community have been working on this in a voluntary capacity for many, many years. For instance, recently Anne and Sean and Andy came down to the Hundavasa Council Reserve for many, many years. So all of those things that we're doing, we want to bring into a formal arrangement. Thank you.
And te tautoko, what Pita has laid out before you, we are passionate and dedicated to the work that we do for the Hundavasa Park Trust. we, as kaitiaki, we envisage retaining and maintaining and sustaining the legacy left by Hundavasa, by Frederick Hundavasa, to the community for generations to come. And so by giving it the care, the love and attention that it deserves, we'll be able to do that. But we need council's help and recognition of us, the trust, as a kaitiaki of the toilets, whether it be an operating toilet or a preserved art piece, whatever it may be in the future, and also for the te hononga itself, to be kaitiaki of both those facilities for the generations to come. Kia ora.
We found it very frustrating over the past couple of years, really, being able to sort of move ahead without getting some things from council through in a hurry. We seem to be left just wondering what we're supposed to be doing. So we would like to actually have a formal agreement with you that we can take care of the whole building as one complex.
Hello, Shirley here. Can you hear me?
We can, Shirley.
Thank you, John. Thank you. I'm going to be the whingy part person for this. I believe that our local community see us as the kaitiaki already, and when the toilets were shut down summarily without us being notified or the community, it was us who were in the firing line, and I found it very stressful because I had to arrange for our toilet cleaning personnel to actually go around to 3 different entities, businesses in town, and actually do the cleaning there. And it was right at the end of the school holidays. The town was flat out, and suddenly, without any warning, the toilets were closed. So it took about a week for portaloos to be put in place, and over that period, I had to help our toilet custodians figure out where to go, what to do, and I felt we didn't get any recognition or assistance. District Council recognised the fact that we are the kaitiaki. We have been so since about 2009, 2008, 2009. You know, as Laurel said, we have fundraised. We have got about 80% of the funding for this new building without really any recognition.
You've got 40 seconds left.
Sorry. Okay. We also need to discuss a forward ongoing toilet cleaning contract. Thank you.
Thank you. Closing remarks.
Hello, John. Just closing remarks in terms of operating. Due to open in about 4 weeks, and we cannot operate a centre when there's no contract in place in terms of toilet cleaning. We see this as quite an urgent issue that has been going on for about 6 months. And I guess in principle, in terms of the kaitiakitanga and looking after the space, welcoming visitors, hosting them in the spirit that we would like to, and also what we have committed to through our funding applications. We just need some support at a high level within council or from the council that they support us to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for your presentation. Much appreciated. What will happen now is that we will ask our Chief Executive. There's 2 things that I've got out of today. Firstly, that contract with the cleaning of the toilets is urgent. Obviously needs to be sorted. But secondly, we will ask our Chief Executive to work with you to bring a report to Council at our next Council meeting, so the matters you've raised can be discussed in regard to recognising you, etc., etc. So thank you very, very much for your presentation, and we'll await now for the various reports. Thank you all. Enjoy
Thank you.
enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
You too, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pleasure having you with us. Okay, thank you, folks. So we will now move to the agenda, and I've just got a couple of comments to make. I told yesterday that there has been $900,000 given through TPK for Hokianga collective water projects in the Hokianga, Motorcracker, Pangaroo, Mototi, Whirinaki, Waimar, Pakenai and Mitimiti. And I thought I'd just let you know that. Aisha, I will send you a copy of the note that I have here so you can record those names of those areas that have the collective water projects. That's come through Civil Defence. I also just want to put on note that Freeze Park has been an issue which John Vucic and Moho and the community board have raised, and so we're looking for a report to be brought, please, Sean, to council on the issue of Freeze Park so we can have a full discussion about it. If you could note that, please. Sean?
Yes, thanks, John. Sorry, I'm on mute. Thank you.
Thank you. And similarly, the issue of Opunoni Wharf has come up, and I've asked the two Western Ward councillors plus the community board, Mike Edmonds is with us today, to please make sure that that gets discussed at community board and recommendations made to us. It's becoming urgent. So between Moko and John, if you could please follow that up with Mike and make sure that that gets done. Okay, thank you all. So now that brings us to...
Just on that last one, that community board has made a submission over a year ago on that.
Right.
Don't know if it's changed, so we need to follow that up and just have a
Okay, John, thank you for that. If you could just revive it if it needs reviving and make sure it comes to council meeting if that's the appropriate step. We just need to actually make an official decision around it if it hasn't been made already. If you could keep between the two of you, plus with Mike and the community board, keep an eye on it for us and push it through. Thank you. Right, so now we move on to item 5 on our agenda, and the first is the 5.1. It's on page 12, to do with approval of unbudgeted funding for drought resilience, and there is a recommendation there on page 12, which I will move. Do I have a second so we can? Thank you, Kelly, so that we can have a discussion. The floor is open, please. Sean, do you or Andy or Melissa wish to make comment on this issue?
Thanks for that opportunity. I will hand over to Andy. Thanks.
Through the chair, this is a fairly detailed paper that outlines what we would like to do in terms of building some short-term resilience around drought. Interestingly enough, when the report was written, it did suggest that August would be a dry month. Clearly, when one looks out of the window over the last couple of weeks, that clearly hasn't been the case, but still there is a prediction around a rainfall deficit as we head into next summer. So this is looking for, it is a comprehensive report that gives a lot of detail, and it sits alongside the previous report that you've considered around our response to drought resilience from last summer. And it gives a number of recommendations and seeks approval for around $2 million of unbudgeted capital expenditure to build resilience across our water networks. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Does Melissa want to make comment as well? Andy, or are you happy with the comments?
I think through the chair, if elected members would like to ask any questions, and I'll call Melissa and Glenn in if I need to.
Okay, thank you. The floor is open, councillors.
Councillor
Kelly here.
Kelly, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Aisha. Thanks. I was on your chat. Really support this report, and we've seen it earlier. It's just today we're being asked to approve this unbudgeted funding. I have a question on the Kawakawa one though, and I'm not sure if anybody can answer this today. So we're needing to confirm the bore connection at that water treatment plant and therefore a consent amendment. And I did some research, and I want to understand like how something couldn't be in our records. I also want to understand why we would ask for a change on that consent if we can see that the water levels are impacted anyway, even if we weren't receiving water, from an intake from the river, and it was confirmed as coming from the bore, wouldn't the river be being impacted anyway? So it wouldn't be worth altering that consent, and we really just need to manage the Kawakawa water supply with, making sure that there are no leaks, making sure that we look for another source, perhaps in Moeroa, which is something the community are interested in, rather than spending $70,000 to confirm something that we may already know.
Okay, thank you. Is Andy, are you able to comment on that?
No, through the chair, I will see if Melissa can answer that.
Thank you. I cannot confirm whether or not the bores and the river are connected, so I guess I feel like it's good value for money to confirm that. I don't necessarily agree that even if the bores and the river were deemed to be not connected, that taking from the bores would affect the river. That's the core of the issue that we're trying to, that we think modelling and getting a hydrogeologist on board could define and quantify exactly what that impact on the river would be taking from the bores. So there's an acknowledgement that there are other areas of the water supply that we need to improve, such as leakage, and that's a district-wide approach through some find and fix work and some leak detection work. But I think to achieve a greater level of service and to reduce the risk of future restrictions, I think this is good value for money, and that's why I've recommended that money be spent on investigating the hydrological connection between the bores and the river.
Okay, thank you for that, Melissa. Just further, I have to reiterate why I support us approving this unbudgeted funding. Remind everybody that we had, our police forces had to bring in extra reinforcements to deal with fights over water in our district, and the fire service had issues. I know that the Kawakawa service had to have an extra storage bag, whatever they call it, bladder for water, and so did Kaikwe. And the lack of water was driving people to access water from streams or bathe in streams, which was then affecting people's take further downriver, or increase the risk of people getting tummy bugs, but I didn't hear of anybody actually getting any. Yeah, so I fully support this, and thanks staff for the report. Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Mako, can we have you please next, and then John Vucic, then David Clendon.
Sure, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Kelly. I just wanted to note that this potential new bore in the deep aquifer at Monument Hill will give a sustainable yield of roughly 30% of Kaikohe's daily demand. And I know that in the peak of the drought, Kaikohe residents led in our water conservation efforts and actually managed to reduce our usage by 30%. So if we look at 30, that's quite cool. I just had a question for Melissa, because I didn't actually get to catch up and hear how it went, but I know that one of the concerned groups in our community about a potential second bore at Monument Hill at Tukarerea are the Waikotihe Trust, and I know that you were having a meeting with them, with a hydrologist as well, and I just wanted to have some feedback on how that went.
Sure. Yeah, we met last week in the Kaikohe headquarters, and we dialed in John Williamson, who has a lot of experience as a hydrogeologist in the mid-north. He dialed in as he's stuck behind the Auckland border. we managed really well with the technology. I thought it would be more of a hindrance and that we'd need to be face to face, but no, it was an excellent meeting. So going into the meeting, the Waikatihi Trust had written to me to say that they did not support the proposal. Throughout the meeting, the discussion was really positive and meaningful, and I think if you're asking for, so I haven't been given a clear direction from the trust at this point. And there were a number of trustees who were much more open than what they had written to me in an email. I think the chairman is less open, and so they wanted to go away as a trust and have some hard discussions out of the public eye, I guess, and come back with a clear position. One of the issues that was highlighted to us was that, when they go back to their communities and tell this story, my perspective when I joined the meeting was, there was an investigation done years ago, which we're taking advantage of that bore, how resourceful of us, well done us. Their perspective was, hey, no one even 10, 12, 15 years ago, no one asked us whether they could put that bore there in the first place. So that was a really good. It was really good to understand their position there and the story that they have to tell the wider community. So the bore is not in the what do you call the middle of a volcano? It's not in the core. It's out on the rim of the old volcano, which is better for them. It's quite sacred for it to be in the core. But that could be a stumbling point, that the bore was never kind of authorized to begin with. So the point that we got across was that there's a staged approach. We're looking for their agreement to go through the next gate. And when we get, so this next phase of work is drilling the bore wider, doing a pump test and getting all that scientific data to inform the conversation further about what is the sustainable yield, what is the impact on the upper aquifer. There are two confined aquifers. Is there any impact on that upper aquifer? Those are all questions that they want to know the answer to. And if we can get on with this next phase of work, we can find the answers. And then we reassured them that there would be another gate. We wouldn't go and seek a resource consent until we'd had that conversation.
Okay,
thank you very much for that answer, Melissa. That's actually really helpful, and I just wanted to thank you for all of your work you're doing for our council in that space too. Kia ora.
Thank you, Nicole. John Busich, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support this. I'm disappointed to see that it's all unbudgeted capital funding. I just want to make a note that that really should be have been budgeted. Given what actually happened in the recent drought, I think it's crucial. I understand that the bore will not supply all the water needs. So the question I actually have on that is what, given the last droughts, and Melissa, maybe you can answer this question, given the last drought that we actually had, if we had this source being available, how much would it actually help? I'm just trying to get a feel for the volume of water that's going to be there. I realise also a dam is being looked at as well, which should solve Kaiko's problems there.
Sure.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Councillor Vucic. So it is about reducing the risk. It by no means eliminates the risk, and it is quite a short-term solution. I think the dam will further reduce the risk to quite an acceptable level. If we had this deep bore aquifer in place prior to this drought, and it was capable of the risk of turning off the reticulation would have been much, much lower. So we got to the point in Kaikohe where we thought there was a risk of not being able to maintain the reticulated supply at all and just going to emergency tank supplies. I think this deep bore aquifer would mitigate that risk. If it's late in the day and I'm not very good with my words.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Thank you, John. David Clendon.
Right, thank you. I've got questions about the Monument Hill and also just one question about the issue 7, the leakage equipment. Monument Hill, there's a comment that there's an expected sustainable yield of 800 cubic metres. I just wonder how robust your science is on that. It's noted that there's going to have to be some testing of that. And it feels a bit it feels a bit optimistic to be putting a fairly definitive budget of 1.184 million on this project with a small contingency when something as basic as understanding what is how much water is actually going to be able to be extracted on a sustainable basis from this. So that's sort of the first question. How well understood is the science? How confident is the expectation of getting that 800 cubic metres? Next question, based on the unfortunate circumstances that have emerged at Sweetwaters around easements and access, do we own the land which will give us access for vehicles and power and pipelines and all the rest of it? Or do we have high confidence that we can get easements over private land if that is necessary at this point? The other point, there's a comment made it'll require an upgrade to the power supply, but the extent of that update is unclear. And again, this to me suggests that budget is fairly nominal at best. And I wonder if it would not be better to ask for a budget later when there's apparent more confidence about just what the likely costs are of the whole project, because the whole thing just does seem to be a little bit opaque at the moment, given how little information there is about some key elements of it.
Okay, thank you, Melissa.
So I'll start with the 800 cubic meters a day. To get that number, hydrogeologists reported that the bore was expected to be that sustainable yield back in the about 2007, I think the report was done. So that's based on standard practice of an airlift test. So when we're doing investigations, they go and drill small diameter bores and then blow air into the bottom of the bore. So this is over 100 meters deep, and the water that they can measure the water that comes out at the top, and that gives an indication as to what the sustainable yield of the bore is. Sorry, I'm not a hydrogeologist, but that's a rough explanation of how John described it at the meeting last week.
Oh, I'm sorry, would you not need to know the recharge rate of that aquifer before you could talk about a sustainable yield?
Yeah.
How long does it take for that water to be replaced?
Yeah, the extent of that layer of cracked basalt is understood. So they look at the geology of the area to estimate the recharge. So it's quite a slow recharge over a massive area. And then in any particular bore, the other factor is what's the friction around that particular area to suck the water in from the surrounding rocks. So there's kind of the two factors. So the recharge is well estimated based on geology, and the sustainable yield was determined using the geology, recharge, and the airlift testing, and that's really standard practice for bore development. John's comment was that the estimations at airlift testings are almost entirely conservative, and that you might expect he would confidently expect more from the pump test than the airlift test.
Okay.
With regards to the easements, so we've been in contact with the landowner. We are anticipating getting easements over the land, not purchasing the land. That's not been progressed any further until we have a clear indication of whether or not the project is going to be funded. And that's similar with power. My understanding, and I'm not fully in the detail such as the project manager, but my understanding with the power situation is that we've got power to the plant to run the current bore. There isn't sufficient power to run a second bore pump, but if we were running the bores not at the same time, the power supply would be sufficient. So it's a bit of a management decision and a risk decision.
Okay, thank you very much. Felicity.
I'm sorry, John, I just had a question too about issue 7, about the leakage equipment, which is a splendid idea. The best way to conserve water is to stop it leaking. But it's, again, the estimated cost of the equipment, quote, is not well understood, but expected to be below $100,000. Again, that's pretty vague. It's not well understood in expectations. Can we not determine what the cost is going to be? Again, I don't want to see another situation which you seem to have quite a number of, where in 6 months or a year we're having to revise these budgets and come back for another bite. Surely there's some sense of what this equipment looked like and what's its value in the market. Well, I mean, what is it that's not well understood about what it's going to cost?
Thank you, David. I think, yeah, your concern is valid. So I have contacted our operators. They don't own any of this equipment now. They didn't have time to obtain a quote from me. So we just put our heads together and came up with that number. The rating implications are based on the money actually spent once the work is complete. Janice, correct me if I'm wrong. So the risk to the ratepayer would only be overspend, and I think personally that risk is low, but also low confidence in that. So I'm sorry I can't give you any more confidence, David.
Okay, I think David's right. We'll need to make sure before we spend that money that we do know what we're spending. So we'll look forward to an updated report on that. Thank you. Felicity.
Thank you, Worship. My two questions are about the Kaikohe bore. And one of the things not talked about for that, and the second question was about the leak detection. So I'll start with the leak detection because we haven't really talked about that. Excellent that we're doing it. We've had so much feedback about that over last summer. You know, why isn't council being proactive about this? Why are we having to save water when there's all these leaks everywhere? And it was just more reactive. So I really like that we're doing that. Correct me if I'm wrong, across this, it's capital funding or operational funding? Because leak detection is a reactive works, or is it just because the equipment is capitalised?
Yeah, so the equipment is capitalised, you're right, but the using of the equipment requires operational time and effort.
Yeah, so I think what's silent in here is the fact that we get this equipment, we need to budget for people to actually do that work and get around our systems before the drought season. So, you know, exactly what you're trying to do here, Melissa, being proactive rather than reactive. So I know that we're going to have more discussions about Three Waters, and in particular with leak detection. I wanted to highlight that about the operational cost and resourcing that if we're going to buy this equipment. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, so for the purpose of this report, which I wrote before the Three Waters funding was announced, I assumed that the existing leak teams would use the equipment to be more efficient. So sometimes we know there's a leak somewhere and we cannot physically see it. So they're able to put it on both ends and narrow down exactly where it is. So be using for the purposes of this report, it was using existing resources more efficiently. But there is an opportunity with the Three Waters reform funding to get more people on the ground.
Excellent, and that's great to hear. So thanks for that. So the second question was about Kaikohe. Councillor Clendon has brought up about the easements I was going to raise. But the second thing was the timing. We know that the droughts happen in summer. We know that it's coming soon. What are the timeframes like for consenting power? Because we know that Top Energy is under pressure to do that infrastructure as well. And we know that John Williamson, hydrologists, geohydrologists are very in demand at the moment. Will we even be ready for the summer? And do the stakeholders, as part of the resource consent, or are they aware of those timeframes that could affect our communities?
Yes, I agree that the timeframes are very tight. I was disappointed that this report got bumped from the last council meeting, such as life, and I think it's important that it is considered against the Three Waters reform. So I understand what happened there, but the project manager is already messaging me going, has council made a decision? Has council made a decision? We need to get moving on this 2 weeks ago. We've already done some obviously early engagement with the trust over the last 6 months, but more so in the last couple of weeks. The hydrogeologist has advised that he is available, and he's got a planner in his team now who's quite experienced in this area. She was working for Opus before.
Yes, Martel.
Yeah. She also whakapapas that she's back to Kaikohe, so she came face-to-face to the meeting of the trust last week. So I think all those small gains, it's a very risky timeline, undoubtedly. If we get another drought next year, and so let's say that the project is funded and the Waikato Trust support the work, we develop the bore and the drought hits and we're not able to get all of the infrastructure in place, we can do some temporary works like we did last year. If we've got the source, then maybe we could do some overland piping like we did at Smoothie Road last year. The key bit is getting that bore fully developed into the deep aquifer.
Right, you've got 30 seconds left, Felicity.
Oh no, it's just to highlight to the lecture members that we are at risk to not have Kaikohe sorted this summer if we don't put the pedal to the metal and get the other infrastructure like power in place, let alone notification of that resource consent.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you for the questions, and thank you, Melissa, for the response. Can we go to Rachel, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. Firstly, I just wanted to recognise Melissa, Andy, as fast as possible so that we can be proactive. I also want to commend my colleagues for their technical questions, which unfortunately are well above my understanding, but I'm grateful for the diversity around the table. I really wanted to take the opportunity to highlight one of our biggest strengths outside of this report, and that's coming from the drought, the community buy-in that we got, the power of communication just by ensuring that we were sharing information with our community, by asking them to play their part in water conservation, and the return on investment that we got through that communication, and really reiterate the importance of ensuring that we go into this summer a lot earlier, ensuring that we get that buy-in a lot earlier, empowered communities, empathetic communities. So we need to make sure that we're taking them along on the journey with us. The second opportunity I just wanted to highlight, and I know that I bang on about this one a little bit, but is ensuring that we're empowering individual resilience as well outside of our networks by looking at how we can do that through our bylaws, our district plan, and our funding opportunities in terms of individual water tanks and things like that. So again, Melissa, thank you so much for the phenomenal work that you do. We are very, very lucky to have you, and thank you for the report.
Thank you, Rachel. Right, I have no others' hands, I don't think.
Yeah, one there from me.
Right, Dave Collard, I beg your pardon, and then I've got Kelly, and then I've got Matty.
Yeah, look, all of my questions are mostly answered, so I did want to offer some support for the Kaitai or Awanui River in terms of the resilience to be able to take water at all stages of the water flow. And I certainly know that this is a concept that Matty came up with over the previous drought. And I suppose it's unbudgeted because of the short time frame, but perhaps it should have been planned for a long time ago. But certainly I just want to offer my support for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you. Can I come to Kelly, please, and then Matty?
I'm last, Your Worship, because I spoke first, please.
Okay,
Thank
Matty?
Yeah, are you there?
Yep, we got you, Matty.
Yeah. Melissa, I can't believe it, really. We've been drawing water from the Awanui River for a long, long time. What's the problem?
So the risk that this will minimise is drawing air into the pipe. So when the river level gets too low, there's a risk of drawing air, which can either burst the pipe or wreck the pump. So by installing a small weir, we ensure that there's water over top of the intake structure always. Also, our resource consent requires that we have a screen of a certain design and size at the end of our intake structure. That's something that we've never complied with or achieved. So this structure needs to incorporate the resource consent requirements of an appropriate screening device in front of the intake. And then there'll be some quite hefty, possibly environmental regulations or, the management protocols and working in the stream itself. So
yeah, you really didn't answer my question, but that doesn't matter. The fact is that when we put that half dam up, the water level where the pipeline goes into the river never actually dropped. I took the measurements, and it never dropped. And that's what gets me now. What we should be doing, the council, and and Andy Finch should be involved in this, is that we should be, where we're drawing the water, because we put that half dam up, we should deepen it. I was talking to a farmer there a couple of months ago, the next door farmer to that land there, and he even agreed that we actually deepen that hole because we've got endless water coming in from the Mangamukas. And that would be a better proposition than spending $150,000 on a weir. Common sense.
Also, I'm anticipating, and anyone who's local could give me an update, but I'm anticipating that temporary structure that we built with the rocks would disappear in the latest flood. So has anyone seen it? Have the rocks disappeared?
I haven't looked. Don't know.
No, yeah, I don't know. We've had some heavy rain and there's been quite a bit of flood water going through, but it wouldn't surprise me that the rocks had moved away. But we have to do it again because there's no doubt we're going to be into a drought again, and we'll have to do it again.
Yeah.
And this time we do it bloody properly with a bit of concrete and et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Maddie.
Okay.
All right, Kelly.
Yep. So just finally, I wanted to reiterate what Rachel was saying about raising awareness and bringing the community with us. Something that we talked about a lot during the drought was consents for rainwater tanks, whether people need a consent or not. Auckland Council have got a really neat tool up on the website and it's called Do I Need a Consent? Some properties that need tanks may need a consent. So we need something like that. And I just want to move away from if we lose people to water tanks, then that's less people for paying towards the infrastructure. Just get away from that because water is, it has, what's the word? It's finite. Water is finite. And that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Kelly, for that comment. Right. So can we have the vote up, please? The resolution's been moved and seconded. Thank you, Kim. So I'm in favour and Kelly's in favour. Councillor Court.
In favour, thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Clendon.
Aye.
Councillor Collard.
In favour.
Councillor Foy.
Yes, in favour.
Councillor Radich.
Mayor Carter, I have to abstain because I'm not happy with that 150,000.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Smith. Abstain.
Support.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Tepanier.
In support.
And Councillor Vucic.
Support.
Thank you. Right, thank you very much. The motion is carried. So we now turn to page 20 and I will move the recommendation. Do I have a seconder, please, so we can discuss?
Kelly,
I'll second, Your Worship.
I'll second. I'll let Moko.
Moko, thank you. Right, thank you. Okay, and I agree, John, it was unfortunate that we didn't have more time to discuss this issue, but I just want to remind everybody today that the main thing, in fact, really the only thing that we will be looking to confirm is that we agree or disagree, get involved with or support the MOU or not. What I would ask is Sean and Andy, etc., that we have a further discussion on the issue of allocation of funding, etc., which are all the points that were being discussed in the previous discussion in the workshop. And we need to have time to ask questions, which is what John was asking for, and I'm sure others have, and secondly, to then make a decision. But today we have to decide whether we're going to be part and sign the MOU or not. So anybody, I'm just looking to, just bear with me for a second. Right, anybody wish to speak? I haven't. John, do you want to comment? John Vucic? Hello?
I'll go while he's sorting out his microphone, Your Worship.
Thank you.
I'm in support of this because it's this first tranche. So that then in our workshop we had just before this meeting, we sort of went over what our delivery program could be with the money. So I'm looking forward to us getting this side over the line. So then all of these conversations can then flow on from within. So we've got a better picture of what's going to happen. One thing that I'm very much probably more in favour of is looking at a northern regional body. If we were to go anywhere like that, I'm a little bit averse, and I think the community is too, to any sort of super regionalisation in this, but I think it's important that we get the message across that this is that first step of signing this MOU to have a bigger conversation, that our communities don't have to be scared at the moment that this means anything more than signing the MOU to get this first piece of the funding. But as it states here, we have every right to pull back at any point in time too. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where we go with this, if we get this across the line, and then the conversations that follow for the infrastructure and everything that our communities need. Kia ora.
Well, thank you, and I couldn't do anything but agree with entirely what you're saying. We have to make it very clear that this is a government initiative of which we're involving ourselves in so that we can inform our communities. That is very important. I've got Felicity, and then I've got Rachel, and then I've got John Vucic.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, Felicity, away you go.
Felicity, thank you, Worship. First of all, I just want to raise that this is an exciting time for our council and New Zealand. I am very pleased to see that central government has recognised that Three Waters needs this investment. It's essential. Unfortunately, local government, Three Waters aren't that sexy to many local government politicians until we come to a drought or until, people can't flush a toilet. And so, unfortunately, it's gotten really bad, and it's going to take time to get better, and it's going to cost a lot of money. So for our ratepayers, you'll see this here, $5.9 million. It is a lot of money, but it's a drop in the bucket, as our staff has raised about the total cumulative cost. Based on what we've talked about this morning in our workshop, I think that expense on the ratepayer really needs to be looked at, in particular operational costs, which directly affects rates, and we need to use this money wisely. So I just wanted to highlight operational spend to reduce the burden on the ratepayer. So thank you.
Thank you, Felicity. Can we go to Rachel, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to all the comments of my colleagues prior to this and really highlight the fact that we owe it to our Far North communities to ensure that they are represented in this conversation with central government. And it's really important to remember that right now this first tranche is a conversation and their voices need to be at that table. Issues such as affordable access to water really need to be front and centre as to what that reform might look like, and our participation in that is the only way to ensure that they are fully represented in whatever that looks like. I'd really like to tautoko Felicity's comments around the fact that this is going to be an expensive exercise and we cannot look to our ratepayers to fund this going forward, to play catch up and to put us in a position where we do have sustainable access to water, which is life. It is finite, but it's the absolute key to the well-being of our communities. So I'd really, again, just like to support our participation in this on behalf of our communities. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Rachel. Can I come to John Vucic, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Carter, look, I'm supporting it, and the reason I'm supporting it is we have to be, as Moko said, we have to be on that table to have a discussion. The issue, it will not save ratepayers money because we also taxpayers, so whether it comes from government or whether it comes from rate doesn't make any difference. I do feel that, in fact, we will find in the long term that there's a reform of local government going on here. And I agree with local government, though, because this whole position that we're in is a result of failure of local government governance. Unfortunately, the amalgamation means less resilience and greater cost. And so I don't see the so-called savings. It's easy to give fancy words and say we'll be equitable and we'll be cheaper and we'll be all of this, but really the devil's in the detail, and that's where the catch is going to be. And innovation and a different approach is needed. Amalgamation has been tried, and getting bigger has been tried around the world with increased costs. Now, you can get the best of both worlds by a different approach, and that is why we need to be round the table with that discussion. I fear they will not listen to us, unfortunately. But I do have a specific question, and it's to do with D. I would like an explanation of point D, agree to delegate decisions about the allocation of regional funding to the Chief Executive. Now, I would presume regional funding is talking about the 4 councils we have got. So that meant to be chief executives. And then since it's so critical, I do wonder whether that is something we want to see. So I'd like an answer there. And likewise, what does it mean? So we have an MOU and it cannot be amended or modified. I presume that means the MOU's on the table and we can't change it, or that we can change it, and then once we agreed. So it's not on the table and we can't change it. So that's the question. That's why I'm reading it. And then, of course, it means enter in good faith, which seems a bit of a contradiction. If you can't change an MOU, that's just thrown on the table and you have to sign it, get the money. So can I have those comments, please, on D and E?
Sure.
Yes, certainly the second question first. The MOU is just a mechanical thing because there are 67 councils to deal with, and they are looking from Wellington for a one-size-fits-all. So rather than get into 67 negotiations over adjusted wording for MOU, they've just insisted on that being the offer. I hope you agree that there's nothing too offensive in it or tricky in it. Would be interested if you thought otherwise, but that's the rationale. As for the allocation of the 14 or so million, which is regionally based, we've put in the recommendations here that you should insist on getting at least the share that would be allocated using the same model that the government used to give us our share in the first place. And that is a formula based on, I think from memory, 75% on population and 25% weighting on area. We did quite well as Whangarei, despite its population, because we have being the 13th largest district out of 67 in the country, we obviously have done well in weighting compared with other areas. But as for the actual breakdown of that 14 million, I would expect that all of the CEOs are going to come back to our respective councils and make sure you're happy with what we work out together. But it is too early for us to have done that yet. What I can tell you about the conversation so far is that we'd be looking for approval to take 500,000 off the top of the 14 plus for an investigation of the viability of a regional structure, because at the moment we've got no resources but some great ideas amongst our councils about how the 4 of us in Northland 4 together could be an aggregation that doesn't necessarily take in Auckland or any of the other notions north of Taupo. So for us to be serious about doing that study and looking at its viability and pitching it to government to get a reasonable hearing, that'll take some resources, and we'd hope to take some funding out of that joint pot for joint purpose. There'll be some other costs too that are to do with some data analysis, which we'd identify that may come at 100,000 per council or something. But at the end of the day, Roger. But at the end of the day, it's small change. So calculations yet to be done. Would be back to you, and there'll be some layers taken off the top. But again, this is low risk, I'm hoping you'll see.
Because it's recorded, I want the ratepayers to actually see some of the discussion. That's why I raised it. I do understand what it means. I prefer to enter into any relationship with the same principles in terms of what you want to achieve. One size fits all, and enforcing an MOU is not a good first start, but certainly it does highlight the need to be around the table for that discussion. And I agree that our four councils do work well together, and that I'd love to see that being an option on the table. But we'll see how that goes with the following discussion. We also have things that we need to deal with, such as private systems that are going to be national. So there's many issues to sort. Thank you for the response.
Okay, can we go to Dave Collard, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Carter. I spoke earlier at the workshop in relation to being lumped in with Auckland and Waikato, and I perhaps have an analogy with that, and feeling like a cork getting washed over the Hook of Walls, we would be swamped. I don't suggest that we don't sign, not for a second, but that we do proceed with eyes wide open and looking for the main opportunity for us, the Northland councils. Big is not better, because we've seen it all before. The cost savings aren't there. I actually support what John Versich says. It is very real, and it's not a question, it's just a statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Collard. David Clendon, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, like others, I'm disappointed to hear that we either take this or leave it. Frankly, that there's no room for negotiating a slightly different MOU. If we were able to do that, I would suggest that we put anywhere it says multi-regional, we insert the word regional, because I personally wouldn't have a bar of multi-regional, because I do believe that it would inevitably involve us and Auckland and Waikato. And the logic of that is that Auckland City, Watercare, whichever, is going to work very hard to make sure that they get lumped in with Waikato, because otherwise they'll still be going cap in hand to Waikato for access to more water out of the Waikato River. And at the moment, that is their only lifeline, it seems, according to Watercare anyway. And I really think that a single entity, everything virtually north of Taupo to the top of the North Island, we would be very much the third leg in that stall. We would get what's left, essentially, and I think we'd be in a very weak negotiating position going forward. There are various other issues around the agreement which I think are very naive or simplistic almost. The government's asking us to identify in our agreement how many jobs will be created. And frankly, how on earth are we going to establish that? I mean, yes, we can guess how many people will work on these projects, but how many new jobs will be created? Given we've got 18 months or so to spend this money, how can we possibly quantify things like that? We're sure there'll be some unskilled work available, but mostly it's going to be skilled work, and you don't conjure up those people. I don't think there are many skilled engineers or digger drivers or any of those contracting type roles sitting around looking for work currently who are unemployed. Just moving, as I say, my point about the multi-regional approach, it's clear that that is their intention. The FAQs, which are on DIA's website, under the heading, what would my council be committing to, it says, entail working with neighbouring councils to consider the creation of multi-regional entities. So really that is the only option on offer. And I just think it's the wrong model for Northland. I think we'd come out of it very poorly. The final comment I'd make is that I think we should start soon socialising the idea with our own ratepayers that these reforms are effectively being imposed on local government, and that they do mean that consumers are going to be paying more for their water. And evidence of that, again, is in the documents on DIA, the Frontier Economics Analysis, Section 4 under Customer Outcomes. It states for most of the jurisdictions examined, which was a dozen or so, aggregation was associated with significant increases in average customer bills. Essentially, these larger entities spent a hell of a lot of money, increased service levels, absolutely, better quality of service, but people are going to have to pay for that. The point is, it's not the aggregation that provided the better quality of service, it's simply the bigger spend. A far better model, in my view, would be for government to give us the funding streams we need to invest in better water supply. It's not the fact that you're going to have larger entities, it's simply that government's going to have a bigger stick to demand more money from consumers. And I do think it's for our own protection and really, in a sense, to make sure that ratepayers know what we are being obliged to sign up to, that in the long run, yes, there will be better service, better quality water, better environmental outcomes, and that's all going to come at a significant cost. That's not the magic bullet that's somehow going to give all of those benefits without people having to spend more money. The idea that simply aggregation is going to cut costs has been disproven in just about every single one of those 11 or a dozen or so examples that's in the Frontier Economics document. So, yeah, like everybody else, I guess we've got no option. We can't say no to $11.9 million, but I do think that we need to make it clear that we're basically being bullied into this by central government, because I believe we are. If it was such a good deal for local government, why on earth would they need to bribe us with that amount of money?
Thank you, David. Good comments. Kelly.
Kia ora, thank you. I just want to reiterate that water is precious, water is life, and the protection of the source of water is very important. And on that, in my research, I've found that 82% of people that were surveyed in a Colmar-Brunton survey are very concerned or extremely concerned about water quality. And over the past 3 years since I've been an elected councillor, I've seen central and local government consider the issues facing our three waters. And for those at home listening in, we're referring to drinking water, wastewater and stormwater, the delivery and regulation and management of this resource. The Three Waters Review that we've been talking about highlighted across New Zealand that there are communities that don't have access to safe drinking water, or they actually lack confidence in the regulation, sustainability and capacity of precious water due to the poor management by water suppliers and, yes, including some councils. The review also highlighted that much of the network is funded by small communities. Upgrades to meet new drinking water standards are all going to be costly. Our own sector representative, our GNZ, which some of our councillors and the Mayor have been working with over the last few years, highlighted similar issues. Their position paper requested a fresh approach to Three Waters to ensure delivery of quality drinking water and wastewater services. The paper also outlined what strong performance in the Three Waters sector could look like. And that's what I'm hoping that we'll get by signing this. And we're already working together. We work together with our neighbours on the NTA, Northern Transport Alliance, and the Climate Change Working Group and Civil Defence. We've even skipped a region and had assistance from other regions, and yes, it was water. So we've shown that we can work with our other neighbours. And whilst there's been some great performance in the last 18 months in our drinking water and wastewater space, central government have a point. Local government isn't performing well and have some serious issues with wastewater treatment plant and water treatment plant issues around performance. And no matter, the negatives for not signing this, we've got the opportunity to be at the table and investigate and work collaboratively on the issues with our neighbouring councils, whether it be right next door or further afield in this water reform discussion. It gives us access to the grant, but it also gives us an opportunity to be innovative and investigate new ways by sharing the risk with our other councils. So I really urge us all to support this signing and be open-minded. Thank you. Excuse the coughing, that's my little boy in the background.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kelly. Okay, I'll put the vote if there's no other speakers.
Your Worship, Councillor Court.
Oh, Anne, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's a hard act to follow, Councillor Stratford. I have been fortunate in that I've attended the Merrill Forum, and I have more literature on my desk in front of me on the Three Water Reform than I probably care to have. I'm going to start a bonfire with it all when we're done. I just want to read some of the highlights to you that resonated with me. So the initial focus of phase 1 is on drinking water and wastewater. However, they will work through the inclusion of stormwater where appropriate as part of the reform program. And that's really important because in all my years of local government, the first thing that's been kicked for touch when budgets are tight is stormwater. And to echo my colleague Councillor Foy's comment, Three Waters is not sexy. All the infrastructure is below the ground. Nobody sees it and nobody gets a big thrill out of it, but it's incredibly expensive. In the briefing notes, the Crown indicates that the new water entities must be able to borrow independently of council, and that comes with a quid pro quo. They also get all our debt. The new entities must be publicly owned with a preference for collective council ownership, and there must be a mechanism to protect against private ownership. Consumer interests must be protected, and the model must allow for consideration of the needs and well-being of local communities. The new entities will be statutory entities designed and established by legislation and will be governed by a board of competency. I really like that. They can have commercial functions or commercial imperatives. They must be financially self-sufficient and sustainable. Councils may no longer have direct control over assets or water provision. However, there will be mechanisms put in place to ensure local service delivery considerations and influences are maintained. The question that is not answered on the FAQ website is how ratepayers will be charged for this new model. So it would be really good to get some clarity around that. I think we're all scared of taking the leap into the big unknown and losing control. But that doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to deliver an adverse result for the ratepayer. It might actually deliver a really positive result for the ratepayer. This morning, I sent you all a copy of the slides that were presented at yesterday's Northland Merrill Forum. I hope you've had an opportunity to look at them. There's some really big numbers on those slides. The Service Delivery Option Review Report is looking at $500,000 from the regional bucket, but yesterday it was signalled that that might be a little light. The Department of Internal Affairs investigation is $100,000 per council for project management, but again, that may be a little bit light. So there's an awful lot of money that needs to be spent up front to determine where we're going to head on this. And I never got the opportunity earlier today. In my last minute, I just want to acknowledge the incredible amount of work that Melissa has done for our team on getting us into a position where I think we can make a really good decision today. So thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Court. Okay, so we'll put the vote. Can we have the vote up, please? Right, so I've moved in favour. Councillor Court?
In favour, thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Clendon?
Support.
Councillor Collard?
Yes, supported.
Councillor Foy?
Support.
Councillor Radich?
Yep.
Councillor Smith?
Support.
Councillor Stratford?
Aye.
Councillor Tepanier?
In support.
Councillor Vucic?
Yeah, I support.
Thank you. The motion is carried. I'll now ask you to turn to page 70 and a recommendation relating to worker redeployment package. I'll move the resolution. Do I have a seconder, please, so we can debate?
I'll second. Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Ford.
Thank you, Councillor Court. The floor is open for those who wish to address the issue. Okay, I'll put the result. No, does anybody wish to speak? I'm happy to put the motion if you wish. All right, okay, can we go to the vote then, please?
Sorry, just want to point out that Moira is singing out for their culverts to be cleared after the last flood.
Yep, thank you.
Well, I couldn't
All right.
get off mute, sorry.
I've moved in favour. Councillor Court?
In favour, thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Clendon?
Aye.
Councillor Collard?
In favour.
Councillor Foy?
In favour. Clean those culverts.
Councillor Radich, thank you.
Who?
Maddie,
Oh.
thank you. Councillor Smith?
Support.
Councillor Stratford?
Aye.
Councillor Tepanier?
In support.
Councillor Vucic?
Yes.
Thank you very much. That motion is carried. So that brings us to the end of the agenda. Just trying to remember, was there one issue, one general business issue?
And a closing karakia.
Yes, I've got that. Thank you. No, okay, thank you. So can we just have a closing prayer? John, do you want to do a closing prayer for us?
I open. Someone else can close.
Someone else can close. Do we have a volunteer?
I'll close for us, Your Worship.
Thank you, sir. The floor is yours.
If the roots are not watered, the tree will surely not grow. Ki te kore te tūtake, māku kungia e kore rawa te rākau, e tupu ake. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all very much for your participation, Sean and staff. Thank you very much. And thanks all. And we will stay safe. Touch base in the morning.
Thanks, everyone.